Hello, everybody. It looks like we've pretty much made it to the end of the semester now. Yeah, it's week 8. I don't know if you've looked yet or not, but on the module or schedule for this week, it pretty much just says turn in the final project. So that's kind of all we have going on this week is mostly lots of lab time to work on the final project and make sure all those get put together. Obviously, in a classroom, we just kind of introduce the topic, so there's still a lot more to talk about. I've got a few odds and ends, just some random things to talk about. Excuse me. So it's going to be kind of a short day, but then lots of lab time. This is a good little slot in the schedule to get the projects finished up, I guess, address any questions about those, things like that. So I guess to start with, just got a couple things to kind of look at here with CSS. I'll jump right in there with that. Oh, somebody disappeared. Oh, she's back. Are you having connection troubles, Tiv?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, it jumped off for a moment. As always, it's being recorded, so if you miss anything,
I turned my Wi-Fi off. I'm on my phone because I have problems with my Wi-Fi, so I just turned my Wi-Fi off. So hopefully it doesn't happen again. Sorry.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah, it's recorded if you miss anything, and I'm always available to answer questions. Because yeah, whenever the Wi-Fi is not working right, there's not really a whole lot we can do about it. And sit there and stare at it, try resetting the router, things like that. But or whenever it's something that's clearly on Spectrum or AT&T's end, all we can do is kind of sit there and hope it works for us. So there's just a couple little things in CSS I wanted to throw in here today that might be useful. So I'm going to start a new page, kind of like normal. We've seen these many times. Going ahead, section, the body. And for right now, I'm just going to put a section tag on here. Put a section tag in the section tag, and that'll be good to start with here. So there's a section tag with absolutely nothing in it. So remember, that's one of the renamed div containers. So that's just a container with it's just a container. We have to put words in it before it'll show. So I'm going to save this as content.html. That's the first of two things we're going to look at here. Yeah, I'll go ahead and open the page. Which is going to look exactly like you expect it to at this point, right? It's there's nothing on the page except an empty container. So whoops, kind of as expected. But what I wanted to look at is there is a way that we can put words there from CSS. We haven't really seen that, and I don't think our book covers it. And this isn't going to be much, so I'm just going to put the style tag right here instead of creating an external one. That way we can see all the code the whole time. So we've seen a lot of different selectors. In particular, the only thing on the page is a section tag. So obviously we'd set up the selector for that. And then we have this attribute that only works with two of our pseudo elements that we've seen, either before or after. So like we've seen, we can do other things before, do styling before and after that element on the page. And if we have one of those called up, we have this value or this property we can fill in called content, where we can just pass in some words. There are words before the section. when I reload that, see those words show up before the section tag. It actually gives us a way to put an entire, we could put all of the content in from the style sheet. We could do the entire thing could do a whole lot from the style sheet. I guess the only way to really look at this is pull up the inspector thing, and we'll expand that and look at the code. You'll see it looks a little bit different though, right? Well, those words aren't showing up. If we check the source code, you'll notice those words aren't really showing up on the page. They kind of are because I just did the embedded style sheet, but if that was an external style sheet, we wouldn't see those anywhere in that code. It's being echoed through the same as colors and stuff. But that gives us a way to put content onto a page with CSS. Kind of continuing a point we looked at last week with a couple of things in HTML. It's any method we have by which we could give a computer instructions, we can give a computer any instruction that it accepts. It just becomes not very feasible very quickly.
Okay. Can you put befores and afters in there too?
Yes. Like this?
Yeah.
Content, these words go after.
Okay.
Yep.
And then to test, oh,
And there's nothing there. So there's no line breaks or paragraphs or anything.
right. So if I put something in that section, just something, if I just put something in that section.
Yeah, so like
yeah, if I went okay.
And I'll just give it some size. So I think what you're asking is this. If I pull the inspector back up, are those words in the element or?
Right, that's exactly my question.
Okay, yeah, so here
are they at the beginning and end of the element, or are they before or after the element?
So here is hovering over that element.
Right.
You can see what highlighted is not the words.
Right.
Yeah, so they are actually outside of it. Let me put something in there so we can see it. These words are in the element. So now you can see a little bit clearer that it is completely before that element or after.
But the sizing you gave for the section went to before and after.
The sizing did affect that, didn't it?
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. Or that's one of the many reasons I asked the question.
Yeah, it affected how big that was. If we go back to the inspector, when I hover over the section, so you can see the before part, the words. So there's the 12 by 12 spot, or it tried to be 12 by 12, but it couldn't squeeze those words into 12 pixels long. I guess I could have picked a better number for that. And then the after part, you can see the 12 by 12 is just that paragraph because that's all that's included there. Does that answer your question, Joe?
I guess as good as it can be answered, or as well as it can be answered.
Yeah. So notice this. I'll make it bigger so it'll fit. With
120 maybe.
Yeah.
That's a nice number.
So now it still shows that section is just right up there at the top. Then inside of that section, we have that paragraph, and that's what picked up the 123. It wouldn't do the height because it had to be taller to fit the words.
Right.
But you can see the before and after, they're inside the section tag. Let me go to background. So there's the only part it tried to put a background on. So everything else just kind of overflowed. It wouldn't really fit in there.
Oh, because the size.
Yes.
So let's say you made that size really,
So
yeah.
like a square, 123 by 123. It still overflows a little bit. You can see it's big enough that it fits that paragraph now. It doesn't have to overflow out of it.
So actually, the before and after picks up the style rules of the section that it's before and after.
Yes. So it's inside of that section tag, but it's before and after any content in there.
Well, then that answers the question.
Let's see. So there's that. Yeah, it's just a way that we can put words in there. I'm going to take that out, and that way it just builds itself to the size it needs to be. So you can see the paragraph filled up the space, and then it shoved some stuff before and afterwards as it would fit. Let me put a link here. href equals HTTPS. I'll go to Google. Oh, and while this is on my mind, let me talk about something with the links real quick. Notice I set that for the secure HTTPS instead of HTTP. This showed up on several people's homework. They weren't quite sure why it wasn't working the first time on the chapter 12 or 13, whichever one had the add to cart button. So the site, the address the book gave you had the secure protocol. It had that S in there. But our free domain our domain host, I go to this. I guess I have to copy and paste it. I'll just copy that.
Well, it says not secure, so that tells you it's an HTTP.
Yeah, so it's the HTTP. So several people, our site was not secure, but they put that S on there. And then when you click the button, it goes to a 405 error, which is not allowed. So it says not allowed. But then if you just clicked in the address bar and hit enter, it would work. And the reason it wasn't working is because the computer cannot change the security level on its own. So whenever we click to this HTTPS site from an HTTP site, it couldn't add the security onto it. But when as a user, if we just click in the address bar and hit enter, a human is allowed to change that security level. So that's why some people were getting a 405 error on that homework, and I completely forgot to address that beforehand. I probably should have said something, but just to explain why that was happening, that the computer cannot change the security level on its own.
Okay.
Really, it's more important for when dropping that security level, but the rules still apply that the computer can't add a security level on its own either.
Okay. Let's say that we've got a contact us sort of, or some sort of form or something in our lovely little website that we're turning into you. Now, obviously, we don't have a place to put that or send that. What do we do?
It'll be fine just to include it. Just make it look nice. Just because you're in the PHP class, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll see how to do that in the next semester. So dealing with that's coming up later. You can get forms to process it for you.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, I know there was those sites that we did that one week, and I guess I've got something because the site that they sent me was a piece of crap. So, I don't know. Maybe it links to something that's useful, because I've still got the junk they sent me. I've still got the code.
So there's also this. You can look up mail to. Yeah, and this kind of shows it. So put an anchor tag and just set your hyperlink reference at mail to a colon and then your email address.
Okay, I could do that. That'll work.
Yeah, that is
because we're not buying anything on my site. So
yeah, that is the least secure way to do it. And a couple times in the past, people would create little bots that would just search the internet for those and spam inboxes where they found them. It's not the best way, but it is something you can do. And just look mail to one word if you need an example, but it goes on a hyperlink reference thing.
Yeah, I think I saw that in the book somewhere.
Or I believe you can also put it in the action on the form. You can put mail to and then that address. That'll work for now, but for this class, mostly just make it look nice. Make it look like you have the contact us button there, and that'll be good.
Yeah.
So the other one I wanted to show here, I just put a random link in here, because that works pretty good for when we're on the web page, right? When we're looking at the words on the page, we can go click that link and follow through wherever it goes. But a very common thing in our society, I guess I need to maximize the screen here, is we'll find nice information on a web page and somebody's going to hit Control P and print that out. And when the preview loads, we'll be able to see that preview just has this, just has the link. And that's kind of useless on a piece of paper, right? It'd be nice to know where that link goes to. So the content attribute, you probably wouldn't want to do your whole page with that. But something I really like to do is to put it in a media query. So at media print. And then for the anchor tags, so like maybe after, then set up the content. And we have certain functions that we can use in the content, one of those being ATGR, the attribute. So we can put an attribute of href. I think that's all I need. Let's see if that worked. Actually, I'm going to take that off the print thing. Y'all have seen media queries. I'm just going to do it on the regular one. That way I can see it on the screen without doing all this stuff. Any quote marks there? Let me just put some words on here so that I'll put some parentheses. Okay. And in the parentheses, so to concatenate things together here, we just do just put them next to each other. Put a space in there, like we in the first string, type in whatever else needs to go there, and then type in the second string. Am I remembering that wrong? Maybe it's just ATT. Nope. ATTR. There it is. And then put that in a print media query. That way, if you come across the printout from a web page, when it's on the page, people can click it. But on a printout, it's nice to see what that link is. And then when it prints out, I guess I might as well go ahead and do that whole thing like I was going to put that in a media query. So like at media print, and wrap that in there. So that on the web page it doesn't show, but if somebody comes along and hits Control P to print out the page, and then on the preview, and see on the preview, when you have that on a piece of paper, it's not a useless link, right? I know that's happened to me a few times before where I've seen something that's printed off the internet and there's a link in a paragraph or something, and just looking at it, it's like, oh, that is a great link. That is something I've been looking for a long time, a source for that information, but it's useless because on the paper, you can't see where the link goes. So it can be useful to just add those words in afterwards. That way somebody knows where the thing's where a link goes to. So that's probably what I use the content thing for most often, is just to add in any of our attributes, any attributes you have for the tag, you can just call this pre-built function attr, and then write in the name of the attribute. If there's also a URL one, we could put a picture as well. Content URL. I don't think I have a picture. Let me grab a picture real quick. Beach picture. Oh. Images. So the same way we would put in a background image, we can call that up in our content as well. Close that. So yeah, a lot of the things that we've seen where we can add extra stuff in, we can just add from the content that way. You may find other useful things. Like I said, what I do most often with that is just in the media query for when it prints, because usually there's a lot of stuff we can turn off whenever we print it, right? There's no need to see navigation bars when you hit print when you send it to paper. And a lot of those things that we could turn off and minimize what's on the page. But the links might still be there, and it's really useful to have where those links go. And concatenation is just done with juxtaposition. Bunch of big words there. We put our strings together by writing them next to each other. We don't need any special symbol. So that can be a useful one. And I didn't think about this yesterday, Blake. That would probably work really, really well for what you wanted to do on those images, right? And just have a description underneath of every picture. You could just do it with the app. So you could do like gallery : after, put your description in there. I didn't think about that at the time, but that might work even better than what we talked about. So the other thing I wanted to look at is something we haven't seen. I don't know if there's really how much you will use this. I very, very, very rarely use this, but we can also set up counters in the CSS. We saw before where we could do basic math with like our sizes and stuff. So like we call this pre-built function calc, and then we can just add things in. So like 12 pixels plus 3 elements plus 24% of the page minus 2 points, and we can mix and match and set up our widths and everything that way. I don't know how big that's going to be, but we can add those things together So we can work with numbers, but we can also set up counters to keep track of how to do things. So we usually start in the body tag and give our counter a name with the phrase counter reset is our CSS property. And then we give it a name. I'll just call it numbers. And we can do several of them. So you can do counter reset, which that means it's going to reset the counter at 0 whenever this tag reloads. So if we put it in the body tag, it's when the page loads or reloads, we reset our counter back to 0. And we can put together several of them. And then we just need to ask for them. So I'll do something down here, like I'll add an article tag and put a couple paragraphs in it. Here's a paragraph. And duplicate that. Again, Control D to duplicate it. That way there's at least 2. So reload that and see those words show up. There's a couple of paragraphs on there, and we can set our CSS up just to count that. I'll put that up here at the top. So article, paragraphs, we need 2 lines. The first one is what counter are we going to work with? And we call this property counter increment, and then pass in that one we gave a name to. So reset, whenever the body tag or the page loads or reloads, we reset the counter back to 0. And every time we encounter a paragraph tag in the article, we're going to increment that same counter. And we can keep track of how many times things happen. And to show it, I'll just put that in the content thing we just looked at, because it's happening in the CSS. So the only way we can get it back to the page is by using that content attribute, which actually means that needs to go afterwards, right? Because all we have is before and afters. I can put that here. I'll put it after. Since there's nothing else, maybe I shouldn't do that. Because normally there would be more stuff going on there. So then I'll do another one, the paragraphs in the article, and we'll do the after pseudo element selector, and then put the content to be that, the counter. The number is counter. We actually put the word counter to get the pre-built function, and then pass in the name of the counter we want. So I just put that in the content tag afterwards. So just some words so that it's not arbitrarily on there. I better put space there. And then call the pre-built function counter and pass in whichever counter we want to show there. So paragraph number 1, paragraph number 2. Fairly straightforward. Hit duplicate a bunch of times to get a bunch of paragraphs. And see it kind of run, the counter just keeps running. It can be a useful thing. There are different values for it. I've never used it extensively, but you might have something you want to use that for, something useful that shows up there. Those are a couple things we can do in CSS that I wanted to show that might be useful. And we can, doing regular sort of programming, what we would think of as regular programming in CSS, where we have branching structures, some like if else, something where we can make selections, and maybe iterative structures where we can reiterate things, we have to do those manually in CSS. So it's possible, but it's not feasible at all. So like if you wanted to do a loop, you'd set up a counter and then manually set up all kinds of things for when that loop stops. Some sort of media query is kind of the at media thing, is kind of the only way you have to make selections. So you have to manually set that up. So it's really not very feasible, but with what's wrote on the page here, it would work. So you could set up counters and then do at media queries and for the size of the page or number of elements or all sorts of different things. But it's a whole lot of work. It's a whole lot easier to do that in a scripting language, which I believe most of you all are taking, have plans to take the client side or the server side scripting very soon. And a lot of people, I believe, are taking both of them. So it's a whole lot easier to do that there. But those things can be incredibly useful. The content, you can just add some stuff afterwards, which, that thing we were looking at yesterday, Blake, I didn't even think, these notes were sitting in front of me on my desk, and I didn't even think about that at the time. So that would probably be the best way to get a description after all the pictures. So you can add content before and afterwards. And if you need a counter to keep track of the things on the page, you can set it up this way. So put a counter reset in the body or root element, and then counter increment for whatever counter you want to do. And you can more than one counter. You're not restricted on, there's no restriction on how many counters there are. And counter increment, pass in the name of that counter. And then whenever you're ready to show it, you call the pre-built function counter and pass in numbers. And about the only way to get that to show is to use that content tag. So just a couple things there about CSS that might be useful. Our book didn't really mention them, so I wanted to make sure and show them. Kind of go over a quick example of it. Does anybody have any questions about either one of those things? Maybe have ideas of where you think that might be useful or anything? Let's see, I'll get that out of the way. So that was what I had as far as CSS to look at today. There were some other things I had on this list that to talk about. One of those, well, for like our site here, or when we post our sites, at the beginning of the semester, I just gave you all a link and said, yeah, you can go set up an account here and they'll let you post sites. And that's domain hosting is the name. So in the long run, you might want to look for something like that. You can look for, just Google free domain hosting. Obviously, is a quick way to do it. And my recommendation, if we scroll past the ads, and again, I'll explicitly state that because that's something on the list, relates to something on the list here. Notice up at the top is all of this, all these ads. We scroll past those, we get down to blogs like 12 best. My recommendation is always check that blog, especially when you're first looking into stuff, because you might not know every trait that you really, the things you want to look, everything you want to look into, right? You probably don't want to just pick the top one on the list. And reading the blogs will have other information, including sort of a way of, the things you need to look at and just figure out what to look into when you're looking for a domain host. That's free ones. Obviously, the old saying, if you get what you pay for, is definitely true here. So there's some really good ones. GoDaddy's been a very big one for a while. Very reliable. It's up. They have excellent support. Yeah, anytime, day or night, you can get on the phone or a chat with the people, and they'll keep your site up, and has great uptime. AWS is very popular anymore. There's a lot of them, but they do cost money. So $11.99, I assume that's a month is where it starts at. And that might just be a name. Is there a pricing list on here? Okay, so this is just a name. They're usually their domain hosting is a little bit more. It's usually like $20 a month for the cheapest, but it gets up to like $100 a month. And actually, what's here was the next thing I was going to look for. What's all this stuff in the way? Okay, here. Right, when we set up that website, they just gave us a name. They just gave us a name to use. Had some weird stuff in it. There was a couple options we could choose from, and that's because good names cost money. So we have to register our names. So that's one of the things with GoDaddy is they're a register service. So if you have a name that you want to use for your stuff, I'll just see if my email works. So like, whoops. I'll use my school email, search and see if that's available. Probably not. Yeah, so it's available, and they'll register it for me so nobody else can use it. It's a restricted name for $1 a month, $12 a year. That's not too bad for a name. But good names cost money. And that's something you do want to you'll want to keep in mind. You can see it's not very expensive. And people have kind of taken advantage of that over the years. You may have heard stories of that, of people that jumped on the internet early, just going and registering a bunch of names. So that when companies went to set up their websites, somebody already owned the name that they wanted, right? I don't know if it was one of these companies, maybe like CNN. And whenever CNN's been around for a while, so when they created a website, they probably wanted it to say CNN.com, and they go to set that up, but apparently somebody already owned that name, and they would charge them a fortune for it. Sell it for quite a bit. So people have done that. That's what. But you have to buy the rights to it, buy the rights to the name you want to use. But if you remember when we talked about search engine optimization, that was one of the things that that was one of the things that was mentioned on there is a really good name. So it does cost a little bit of money. Namecheap, they've been around for a while. Again, this is a register hosting site. I was looking for a pricing. Oh, there it is. So you can see it varies wildly. They have lots, like you would expect, they have lots of plans. How much storage you have. Some of them restrict traffic. I don't think this one has any restrictions on traffic, at least not on their paid for accounts. But there are free accounts or paid for domain hosting. And in general, that old saying of you get what you pay for definitely applies to things on the web. But even on a free domain hosting, if you want to use a good name, like what I just pointed out, registering that name on GoDaddy for $1 a year, I could take that name and then use that on that free site we've been using this semester. I just have to own the name in order to do that. And normally that's found through a register, domain name registrar. You search for that and you'll get a big long list. You can see right at the top is GoDaddy. They've been doing that for a while, and they also have some really good domain hosting. But you want to keep things like that in mind. Maybe start shopping around, like window shopping, looking at prices. That way, when you're ready to buy some, you have an idea of how much it's going to cost, and a little bit of somewhat of an idea of how much you're going to want to spend. I guess the next thing on this, well, these Google search results up at the top, the ads. Right. Might as well start with spending money here. Depending on what idea you have, it might be nice to have one of those ads, right? So to do for that, that is just ads.google.com. Go in here and whoops. Tried to move the pictures out of the way and they did something weird. They got really big. And you just sign in with your regular Google account and stuff. Set up the name of the URL. It's taking a long time. There's really not much to it. Yeah, you just tell them what your website is, and so you start a new ad campaign, click through a couple options, and then that will get your site listed there at the very top of every search result, every related search result in that ad section. That one does cost money, right? And so I wanted to show you it first with like the domain registry, registering a name, the things, those cost money. But y'all aren't in this class for spending money, are you? We're in this class to learn this stuff to make money. So related to ads, there's definitely a way, that's definitely something that's a common way to make money, right? So this is the one you're probably going to want to remember. It's Adsense, Google Adsense. So I guess you can just search for that. So Google AdSense. And this is super easy. It's kind of what we're used to seeing on web pages, right? We go to a website and then there's the content that the developer put there, but then there's all that targeted advertising showing up, right? Like if you've been to Kroger recently, you're going to see ads for groceries, or I'm all the time seeing ads for electronics and things like that. Actually, I can point at some. If I go back to this free domain hosting thing, I think there was a blog. Yeah, if I go to this blog, somewhere in here, there's probably some ads. I don't see any ads. Well, that's weird. Usually we see lots of ads. Let's try this one. Tech Radar, that's a magazine. They're probably covered in ads. No ads. I know something that definitely has ads on it. I'll go to the Dilbert comic. It's always got advertising on it. There we go. Well, there it is. Yeah, I guess it's just taking a long time. Maybe the other ones were just taking a long time to load. We all know the things I'm talking about. Oh, if it loads up this time. Yeah, all of these. So like, I don't know why I'm saying New York Times things. But if you went to this page, you would probably see something different for the ads, right? Well, that is annoying me. So maybe YouTube. You all know what I'm talking about, I believe. The targeted advertising where it goes specifically for the user. And to get that into our site is really easy. You just go to google.com/AdSense and hit get started. And then all you do is tell them, give them the URL of your website. So just copy and paste your URL in there, whatever it is. And you'll want to sign in with you use your normal Google account, which would probably be the most logical thing to use. And if you don't have any sort of Google merchant thing, you do have to give them information about where to send the checks. But yeah, just tell them what the site is and log in with your Google email. And on the next screen after this, they'll give you some code to copy and paste to put in there. Just like those things we were looking at a couple weeks ago. The code's ready, just copy and paste right in there. Oh yeah, here. So you just sign in with your Google account. You just have to tell them where to send the money. So either an address where they can mail a paper check, or tell them what your bank account is so they can deposit money for you. And they'll just give you a little snippet of code that you copy and paste right into your website and then get a check. Because every time a user comes to your website, then they will see that custom advertising, which doesn't seem to be pulling up on mine. Usually that stuff's everywhere, right? Yeah, that's fine. I don't necessarily need to pull that up. I think you all know what I'm talking about. Those custom ads where we all see ads unique to us from the data that Google has collected. And yeah, so you might want to make note of that, just AdSense. And yeah, they'll give you code. So just like we saw before with like Facebook buttons and PayPal buttons and all that stuff, copy and paste, stick that in your site. Only with that one, you copy, paste, stick that in your site, and then you get paid, which is kind of what why we come to school to learn this stuff, right? And it makes up for that other stuff that I was just talking about where you have to pay to get that to happen, right? Like registering a domain name or paying for a good domain host. That stuff costs money, but if you make more money than that from the advertisements your site shows users who stop by, then you still end up way ahead from that. So it's worth it, usually worth it to go ahead and move those things over. People are used to seeing them anyway. And let's see, 150, so almost an hour here. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about was just kind of a concept. So this semester, we've just been learning HTML to starting out learning HTML and CSS, right? Just kind of getting started and typing it all up. Ultimately, you probably won't write a lot of HTML code. You'll write scripts that write the code. Programs that just generate the HTML code when the user hits print or something. And that way you could, if you're working on a team at some company, you put together, as a developer, you're going to put together a user interface that the artist can drag their mouse around. And then as somebody in the art department drags their mouse around, it's going to generate all the HTML and CSS code for them. Sort of a generating thing. But just something to keep in mind as you progress forward and learn other bits of programming. I think I have an example I can pull up here if I haven't cleared it out. This one might. Oh, yes. I'll open this up real quick. So there's something written in Python that if you haven't seen it before, this is just a list of things, list or an array to reuse. So there's a bunch of HTML code put into this array to just use over and over and over again. And then down here, there's other things where the Python code is different bits of it run start to put different HTML code together. And this other script, which is a more traditional programming, easy to use, click on it to start it going, or if there's a user interface, drag mouse around, it writes all of the code and generates this stuff and puts all of this HTML code together. So as you progress forward, keep that in mind, that with what we've been looking at this semester, I know a couple of y'all are getting the website development course. So you'll probably still be doing HTML and CSS directly, but those getting the software development degree, you're going to do a lot more of writing programs that write this code for you. And then you'll hand the art department a program where some artist can drag their mouse around and it'll generate a bunch of HTML and CSS for you. So as you progress forward and learn about writing files in different programming languages, keep that in mind and maybe give it a little bit of practice on your way through school. Because it is just a text file, right? That's how we wrote our code. We'd open up a text editor and write it. So whenever you're learning other languages and you get to that section where you're writing text files, just remember you can always just put the .html as the file extension and write the text file just like we did manually from another script. So it might be good as you progress forward to practice that and get used to it, because ultimately you'll do a lot more of that and things that generate code, which was in that last one, but it's kind of a mess. Let me just share the screen and I'll do a very simple version here. So I'm gonna do a small thing in Python real quick. Define, I don't know, some function. And the world. So I'll create a little Python script. Nothing too fancy there. I guess I have to do this. Why didn't that run? I know where I saved it. Users, Chris, documents, delete folder. I thought that's where I saved it. Oh, that's why. I have to actually call that function. There we go. Now I do something. Yeah, so nothing fancy, just prints out the hello world. So it's super stripped down example there, but that's the basic idea of how we build up big programs, right? We write lots of little modules like this and objects and different things and put together a big sort of program. Eventually something like, which one I can pull up? Oh, WX Python will work. So this is a very popular user package to make a user interface, basically. So in Python. So when we put stuff like that together, we want people to know how to read it, the API reference material. We want people to know how to work with it. So we need some sort of thing that we can, it's probably going to go on a website. So that's why it's related to this class, the HTML and stuff. So that somebody wanting to learn to use it can, kind of click on it and get all the instructions, documentation about how to use that in their code and see what happens with it. And that could be a lot to type up, right? For this short one, not so much. But oftentimes, those are set up so that we can just generate that web page with a special type of comment. So this is the symbol for comments in Python. So like I said to say hello world. Just a little description on what it is, a super simplified example here. But then from this comment, I can generate an entire website to document this stuff. Yeah, so a very popular one of generator is called Doxygen. I'm just a little wizard here. I was just kind of pointing you towards this along the lines, the thought of we write code that writes this code. So that's kind of what this is. So set up where the source code is, which is that file I just created. Yeah, in that folder. And I'll output to the same thing. That'll work. All of these, yeah, I'll just skip to the end. I need bunch of this, yeah. Oh, I must have skipped something that I need. Oh, I need a working folder. Will that run now? There we go. So now the button's not grayed out. So I basically just told it where that file was. And well, when we document our things, it's nice to put it in a website. And this is an example of that point I was just expressing. Ultimately, we write code that writes code. So here's the documentation on that little method that I wrote together. There's not much to it yet, but we can see there's this entire big website showing all these different things and the functions that are available to us and descriptions, and we can put different things out just from a line or two in the comments, and then it just generates the big website. So ultimately, we'll do things like that, have code that writes code. The biggest thing on this one is you can see that it included a style sheet, which is kind of lousy. They included all these other files. So I come in here, somewhere in all this code it wrote, there's a couple of style sheets. I always delete those, and y'all know how to, and when you're working with things like that, you can pull up the code and get all the IDs and class names and remake a style sheet so that it looks a lot better. But that sort of thing, just from a couple lines and the comments of this code, really it's this right here. That is set up that if it pass in a Python script, it looks for 2 hashtags in a row, and then anything that has that gets added to the website. And write code that writes the code. I don't need that. So I guess I'll have a Python script open with open test.html for writing as 2 files. Oh, thing went behind the pictures. I couldn't see what I was typing anymore. That'll work. So I'm just going to, that Python part might not look too familiar there, but that string that I said to write to a file, that should look familiar, right? So things like that. When the code runs, it will, well, in this case, it's just going to generate this automatically, but eventually, put together a user interface where an artist that doesn't know how to sit down and write a bunch of code can just drag their mouse around and generate those things. That's where we tend to use HTML a lot more in software developers. I guess I need to run that code. Should have just kept that open. Python hello.py. And now that ran, it should have so there's the file that was just created this minute of the HTML code generated from a script. View the page source. See, there's the words that were kind of that were passed in with that text writing file. So that's something to keep in mind as you progress forward and learn other languages. Now that you've seen HTML, every other programming language you learn, or most every other programming language you learn, one of the things included is going to be writing files, writing text files. And what we were learning this semester is just a text file. So maybe give that a little bit of practice. That way you're ready to produce that sort of software when it's needed. It's just like the HTML code we put in. It's just passed in as into an instruction to write it to a file. Not really something we're looking at here, but something you will see and where you will ultimately be using this code a lot more. We write code that writes this code. As you all have probably noticed, it's very, very time consuming and tedious. Right? I think you asked the question one day, Joe, about when there's 5 or 6 pages on the site, if you want to change something, do you have to go through and manually change it every time? At this point, yes. But if we had a script writing it for us, then we would only do that once and rerun the script. Or CMS sites, we tend to fit where we fill a database up with the HTML code. Like there, I just typed it right in. But we will fill up database tables with HTML code. And then when a user goes to our site, what we actually do is just query the database. Depending on the user and what the user wants to do, we run a bunch of database queries and only echo back the HTML code that we need at that time. So ultimately, that's what we do with this HTML and CSS. So as you learn the other languages, it can be a really good idea to go ahead and get little bits of practice on that. Right? As you go through your database class, give that a try, that basic idea. Put some HTML tags and other random words into a database, and then echo those, and then retrieve those in different orders from a query when you're in your database class. Or when you go through a class learning Python, when you get to the text writing, the writing text files, write a HTML file, because that is just a text file, or a CSS file, and get a little bit of practice at it. That way, when you really need to do it, like after you graduate, get a good job, and need to do that in a hurry, it's not suddenly brand new. You've already seen it a time or two. So just a thought to keep in mind. Ultimately, we'll write code that writes this code. But right now, we are writing the code, right? And by the end of this week, you're supposed to have written a lot of code for me. The projects. So that's, I just had a very short list of things to discuss to make sure there's this big block of time that was open on your schedule to work on that project and get that finished. So pretty much the rest of the time on our scheduled slot, what is that? Another 2.5 hours is going to be dedicated to lab time, work on those projects and get those finished. And as always, I will leave my video set up here, so I will be right beside the computer and can jump back on here in a split second if you have a question. Or if you already know you have a question, you can just stick around after I stop the recording and we'll go over some stuff.
Yep. I got questions.
Got a question?
Oh right. Yeah, I've had a lot of fun this morning trying to make videos to put in, and of course I have questions on what the best way to put the videos in, because sometimes that takes a lot of space on your page.
Well, what I like to do anymore is I like to save the videos on YouTube and just embed the YouTube video.
Okay, that's what I wondered, is if you put a href in to the YouTube video.
Oh, well, I'll pull that up. We looked at it very briefly. YouTube wants you to share their videos. So if you go to YouTube, the browser's running really slow.
Yeah, because I've got a bunch of videos up there. And I wrote some, I did some this morning that they're not beautiful, but they'll work. That well, for me, a short one to describe a site for this virtual cycling thing is about 5 or 6 minutes. That's pretty good because there's enough stuff to show people. I know we like really short ones. Actually, for that's pretty short, but I've got I figured out how to get the software to find all these things so I could get on the different sites and play with them. But
yeah, so we can just go to any video. I was getting ready to grab one of the videos from this class. I'll just click on this one. Just a random collection of memes.
Yeah, and I know it's got an address that you can give somebody and say, okay, here's the address for that video.
Oh, so you don't even need to do that. So right below the video, see the button that says share here?
Okay, share. Right.
And then there's all these different options of how to share it, including embed. If you go to embed, that will give you some HTML code.
Oh, and it already writes the code.
Yep. So then all you do, don't even have to, and they even give you a copy button. You just hit copy, then bring that over to your text editor.
And then slam it in there and away you go.
Yep.
Oh,
HTML.
geez, that takes all the fun. That takes all the work out of it. Isn't it nice?
Yeah, that's so much. That's why I didn't spend much time on those video things.
Well, yeah.
Because that's where I do it with all my videos anymore. Is just save them there.
Okay, okay.
So now if I open that page,
and it's going to be an iframe, which means it's going to be embedded.
Which means it won't validate, but YouTube does. It will work. That's what really matters, right?
If that's all you care about. Because see, I did the video thing first. Of course, I only did an MP4. I didn't even do anything else. And I tried to make my thumbnail small enough that it didn't take up too much space because you can always full screen it. But what I wondered is if there was a way to click on it or to make it so you click on something and it would open another window.
Oh,
that's why I wondered about putting an href to the name of it and putting a target was underscore blank, so that when I clicked on it, it would just open another window and pop.
Yeah, the videos should.
Well, I'm going to try that because I've got 3 or 4. Now I had one other little.
I think you just turn on controls, and one of the buttons built into the controls on the video.
Well, it is for full screen, but it full screen's in the same window that your website's in.
So for that, it might be better if you have the MP4s there locally, just to do a page that only has that video, and then just have a link to it with the target to a blank page.
Target it to a blank page. Okay.
Yeah, that would work for what you're asking.
Wait a minute. Okay, so let me make sure I got this right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put another page in that you don't get to any other way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then it holds your video, so when somebody clicks on that, it opens in a new tab, so they don't lose their place.
I've got so far I've either got 3 or 4 short videos. The one I had problems with, the one site, even if I don't use any of the sound, because the music is, copyrighted. Well, so's the video, unfortunately. Now, I'm not monetizing this, so I don't know whether I'm going to be in trouble, at least if I just submit it to you and then get rid of it, or what happens.
Yeah, usually copyrighted material just means you have to pay them if you make money. So
if I make money.
Yeah. And in education sites, we're usually okay.
Okay, so I can put that in for at least what I'm going to submit to you, and if I go real on this thing, I'll take it out.
Yeah, if you go real, you want to check their copy. With the copyright, they will have information about how you're allowed to use it.
because when I downloaded it to YouTube, that was the restriction on it. All the other stuff, it let me, since the only sound on it is me, I didn't use any music, or there's no music anyway. And on the one site, it had music too. Well, I didn't type in the music because the only sound was me describing the site. But on the one site, it does have video on it too. Not just a video of somebody writing in the thing, but that's what it is. So yeah, that's where that one got messy.
Somewhere in the long run, ultimately what you have to do is check their copyright information. Somewhere there's going to be a README file that will say how you're allowed to use it and who to send the checks to, basically.
Right.
So you always want to look for that stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's the only one. Not that I think this website's ever going to go anywhere, but who knows? It might.
A lot of people interested in that same topic.
Well, yeah, but they're probably doing a lot better than I do. But you'll get to see that in a few days. I've got a
Okay.
couple other things that if I can manage to get wrangle another free day or two of playing with it, I could show those sites as well. Because basically what I do is I get on the site and I ride and I get my OBS studio up and do a real quick and describe the video. Now, okay, so basically what you're telling me to do then, I want to make sure I'm doing this right. So I'm going to do an href, or I'm going to do an href
Yeah.
to, you say another. Okay.
Yeah. So whatever the video page, and then to open a new one, you set target equal to _blank.
Target equal _blank. Okay, now I know how to do that way. So the href is to go to that. So I would go to the video page,
Mm-hmm.
and then all my videos would be on the video page.
Yeah. That might work. And if they're all on the video page, you can give them an ID. So add an ID into that iframe if they're on YouTube or whatever, and then do the link like that. And then it'll go to that other page and jump to the spot on the page. Sort of the
So I would give
to a section.
I would give each video an ID, put each video in a.
That might be useful. However you want to do it.
Now I'm getting more confused than I may just play with this and see what happens.
Maybe just go to the other page. But whenever we go to another page, we can also do that go to content all at once. Remember those links where we could jump to different spots on the page?
Go to content.
We can put that right in our original, in the original link to the page, so it goes there and to that spot on the page.
So it's going to be video.html, which is the page, and then my
the ID, if you want to do that.
So I would make the ID like the one would be Zwift, and one would be RGT, one would be B.
Exactly.
Yeah, those guys.
Because if you had like that skip to content at the top of the page, you would just have it like this, right? Hash and then Swift or RGB or whichever. We can do that all at once. If you're going to another page from it, that way it looks like it's
so then that other page would be the video page,
mm-hmm.
and then when I get to the video page, when I have the actual thing, the actual video, am I going to have those videos stored as part of the website, or am I going to run them to YouTube?
So this is if you had, well, that's however you want to store them. Once you get to the other page, you could have either the audio, give the audio, or not audio, the video elements IDs to skip to them.
Yeah.
Or you can just stick in the YouTube videos, and if you don't want to mess with what they gave you, you just do something like this.
Section ID equal.
And just wrap that.
Okay, now the ID equal, when you say vid, that's.
I just made up that name.
But that would be that would be the same ID that I have down in the href on the other page.
Yes.
Okay.
Like that.
Right.
Yeah. And then that way you don't mess with the code from YouTube, and you have it just a container holding that code they gave you, so you can have all the IDs and things, classes and things like you're used to.
Okay, because on the one video, what I ended up doing, I mean, I've also saved them to YouTube, but what I did was I just had a subdirectory of video.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That would work. You can skip to YouTube playlist. There's an embed button as well, or a way to share the playlist. I think the playlist you have to give a link back to the YouTube site.
Well, I'd probably do each one separate, but okay.
That works. You just want to give it a try.
We're going to meet Wednesday, right?
Yes. And
That
again,
gives
on
me-
Wednesday, it'll be like about an hour.
That
and then
gives me a
I'll add
couple of
question
days.
time.
That gives me a couple of days to try to figure this out. So I guess I'll code a video page with just videos sitting there, and it'll pop in the video, and you hit the button, and then that page will also have a nav section, so you can always navigate back to whatever page you want to go to.
Yeah.
So I'll just take one of my pages and,
That works. Yeah, give it a try. Sometimes it takes a couple tries to really figure out what you want to do, but
it'll probably take me about 6 tries on this one.
yeah. And this week especially, I've added, like I just said, I was be sitting here for the whole lab time. I've kept my schedule open all week. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Okay.
I've made sure that I'll be available.
Okay, because if I do the video page, then my thumbnails can be big enough that if you don't want to go full screen, you can just watch it. And if you want a full screen, one of the controls is.
Yep, that'll work. Did anybody else have questions about stuff? Or?
All right, thanks. I'll get out of your hair.
I have a question because Joe brought up the nav buttons. Look, so I was looking when you were talking about the style sheets within the HTML document. Let's just say if you, and I know, generally speaking, you want to keep the nav buttons, and me with these